The words hit me like ice water. She wouldn't understand. She never finished college. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stood frozen in the doorway of our home office, the tray of coffee and pastries trembling slightly in my hands. Through the crack in the door, I could see Marcus, my fiancé of 2 years, gesturing dismissively as he spoke into his laptop camera during what I'd thought was a private video call. "No, seriously," he continued, his voice carrying that particular condescension I'd been hearing more frequently lately. I try to explain basic academic concepts to Vivian, but there's this vacant look. It's like trying to teach calculus to a golden retriever. Laughter erupted from the speakers. I recognized the voices, his academic friends from what he called his intellectual circle. Dr. Richard Chen, Dr. Patricia Okoye, and Professor Daniel Morrison. They met virtually every Thursday evening to discuss their research, their publications, their brilliance. "Marcus, that's terrible," Patricia said, though her tone suggested amusement rather than reproach. "Surely she has other qualities." "Oh, absolutely. She's decorative, cooks well, and she doesn't ask too many questions about my work, which honestly makes life easier. Can you imagine having to explain postmodern epistemological frameworks every time I'm trying to write?" My hands had stopped shaking. Something cold and sharp was crystallizing in my chest, replacing the initial hurt with something far more dangerous: clarity. I set the tray down silently on the hallway table and pulled out my phone, opening the voice recorder app. My fingers moved with practiced precision, a skill I'd developed during years of documenting research findings. Years Marcus knew nothing about. "The thing is," Marcus continued, warming to his subject, "I need an intellectual equal, someone who can engage with my work at a meaningful level. Vivian's sweet, but she's essentially uncultured, unrefined. I've been thinking lately that perhaps after the wedding, I might need to maintain certain separate arrangements. For intellectual stimulation, you understand." "Marcus," Daniel's voice carried a warning tone, "you're talking about your future wife." "My future wife who thinks a bibliography is something you find in a library catalog," Marcus laughed. "Look, I'm not being cruel. I'm being realistic. She has her place in my life, and I have mine. They don't always need to intersect." I stopped the recording. 23 minutes of pure, documented contempt. But I didn't need to hear more. I'd heard enough to confirm what I'd been suspecting for months, that the man I'd agreed to marry had never actually seen me at all. He'd only seen the version of me I'd carefully constructed. The irony was so perfect it almost made me laugh. Almost. I picked up the tray again, plastered on my most vapid smile, and pushed open the door. "Marcus, honey, I brought you some snacks," I said, my voice light and airy, every syllable a performance. "I know how you get when you're doing your important academic stuff." He turned, and for just a moment I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or fear. But it vanished almost instantly, replaced by that indulgent smile he reserved for me. The smile you'd give a child who'd just presented you with a crayon drawing. "That's thoughtful, Viv," he said, already turning back to his screen. "Just set it down anywhere. We're in the middle of a crucial discussion about my upcoming keynote." "Oh, your keynote," I gushed, setting the tray on his desk. "That's the one at what was it called again? The International Conference on Contemporary Philosophy? Philosophical Discourse and Modern Pedagogy," he corrected, not even looking at me. "At Oxford. I've told you 3 times. Right, right. Sorry. I always get those big words mixed up." I giggled, playing my role to perfection. "Well, I'll leave you brilliant people to it. Don't work too hard." I caught Patricia's pitying smile before I closed the door. Poor Marcus, her expression said, saddled with such a simpleton. If only she knew. Back in the kitchen, I stood at the window overlooking our modest backyard, watching the evening shadows lengthen across the grass. The house was a rental. Marcus had insisted we wait until after his big promotion before buying property. Everything was always about waiting with Marcus, waiting for the right opportunity, the right moment, the right circumstances. I'd been waiting too, but not for the reasons he thought. My phone buzzed, a text from my assistant, Jennifer. Dr. Westbrook, the verification came through. You were right about the discrepancy. Full report attached. I opened the attachment, scrolling through the document that I'd commissioned 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of careful investigation, discreet inquiries, and forensic examination of credentials. 3 weeks since I'd first noticed something off about Marcus's dissertation, the one he kept in a leather-bound volume on the shelf in his office, displayed like a trophy. The document Jennifer sent was thorough, devastating, and exactly what I'd suspected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Vivian Westbrook, and I hold a doctorate in educational psychology from Stanford University. My dissertation on cognitive bias in academic credential evaluation won the Langston Prize and was published in 3 peer-reviewed journals. For the past 6 years, I've worked as a consultant for universities and corporations, helping them identify fraudulent credentials and degree mills, the fake institutions that sell worthless diplomas to anyone willing to pay. I'm very, very good at my job. Which is why, when I met Marcus Holloway at a friend's dinner party 2 years ago, I'd found his credentials. Interesting. He'd introduced himself as Dr. Marcus Holloway, PhD in philosophy from something called the International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies. I'd never heard of it, which in itself wasn't unusual. There are thousands of legitimate institutions worldwide. But something about the way he said it, the slight defensive edge in his voice, had triggered my professional instincts. So I'd done what I always do. I'd investigated. What I found was fascinating. The International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies didn't exist, at least, not as an accredited institution. It was a website, a P.O. box in Panama, and a very sophisticated operation that sold life experience degrees for anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000, depending on how impressive you wanted your credentials to appear. Marcus's PhD was worth about as much as the paper it was printed on, but here's where it got interesting. Marcus didn't just have a fake degree. He'd built an entire career on it. He worked as a senior educational consultant for a mid-sized corporate training firm, commanding speaking fees and consulting rates that would make any legitimate academic jealous. He'd authored 2 books, self-published, I later discovered, and maintained a carefully curated social media presence as a thought leader in educational philosophy. He was, in short, a fraud. A very successful, very confident fraud. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. And when he'd asked me out that night, something in me had decided to run an experiment, a social psychology study of sorts. What would happen if I, a legitimate expert in detecting academic fraud, pretended to be exactly the kind of person a man like Marcus would feel superior to? So, I'd created Vivian the character. Vivian who'd dropped out of community college to take care of her sick mother. Vivian who worked as a freelance event planner. Vivian who said "like" too much and got confused by big words. Vivian who gazed at Marcus with wide-eyed admiration whenever he launched into one of his pseudo-intellectual monologues. Marcus had fallen for it completely. Within 3 months, he was telling me I was different from other women. Less threatening, he meant. More manageable. Within 6 months, he'd introduced me to his academic friends, all of whom treated me with the kind of gentle condescension you'd show a beloved, but not too bright, pet. Within a year, he'd proposed, presenting me with a ring he'd clearly bought on credit and a speech about how I completed him in ways that compensated for his intellectual isolation. I'd said yes, already planning my research paper, Cognitive Dissonance and Imposter Syndrome, a case study in academic fraud and intimate relationships. But something had shifted over the past few months. What had started as an academic exercise had become personal. Because the more time I spent with Marcus, the more I realized that his fraud wasn't just about a fake degree. It was about something deeper. A fundamental contempt for truth, for genuine achievement, for anyone he perceived as beneath him. And I'd become his primary target for that contempt. The coffee incident had been the first warning sign. 3 months ago, I'd accidentally, on purpose, left a journal article on the kitchen counter. Not one of my own, but one I'd been reviewing for a colleague. It was about epistemological frameworks in modern education, coincidentally the same topic Marcus had been pontificating about at a dinner party the week before. When he'd found it, he'd laughed. "Vivian, sweetie, why do you have this? Were you trying to read it?" "I thought it looked interesting," I'd said, keeping my voice small and uncertain. He'd patted my head. Actually patted my head, like I was a dog who'd done a clever trick. "That's adorable. But honey, this is graduate-level philosophy. There's no shame in not understanding it. Not everyone is meant for academic work." I'd watched him put the article in the recycling bin, his expression a mixture of amusement and pity. That's when I decided to push the experiment further. I'd started leaving small clues around the house. Books on educational theory, printed abstracts of research papers, my old university sweatshirt that I'd found in a box of old clothes. Each time, Marcus had either ignored them completely or made some dismissive comment about my aspirations to understand things beyond my capacity. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. His brain literally couldn't process evidence that contradicted his established narrative of who I was. It was a textbook case of confirmation bias. He decided I was intellectually inferior, and now everything he observed was filtered through that lens. But tonight had been different. Tonight, I'd heard him say it out loud to his friends, his colleagues, his fellow travelers in the land of fake credentials and borrowed credibility. And tonight, I'd decided the experiment was over. My phone buzzed again. "Jennifer. Also, the conference called. They want to confirm your keynote presentation for next month. Should I send the updated abstract?" I smiled. The International Conference on Academic Integrity and Credential Verification. Hosted by Oxford University. The real one. The same conference where Marcus claimed to have been invited as a keynote speaker. That had been another lie, of course. I'd checked the conference roster 3 days ago. Marcus Holloway wasn't on it. But Dr. Vivian Westbrook, that was me, was listed as the opening keynote speaker, presenting on Modern Degree Mills and the Crisis of Academic Authenticity. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental, because 2 months ago, when Marcus had first mentioned his Oxford keynote, I'd reached out to the conference organizers. I'd suggested they might want to investigate one of their proposed speakers. I'd provided them with just enough information to start asking questions. Marcus had never been invited to speak at Oxford, but he'd apparently told everyone he had been, his friends, his colleagues at work, his professional network. He'd even updated his LinkedIn profile with the honor. That lie was about to catch up with him in a very public way. But I was going to do this carefully, methodically, because after 2 years of playing a role, I'd learned that the most effective revelations aren't dramatic explosions. They're slow, methodical unveilings. They're watching someone's world crumble piece by piece as they realize that everything they thought they knew was wrong. I pulled out my laptop and opened the folder I'd been building for months. Inside were subfolders, each meticulously organized: financial records, documentation of Marcus's spending habits, the credit card debt he'd been hiding, the loan he'd taken out to buy the engagement ring, the royalty statements from his self-published books showing sales of fewer than 200 copies each. Professional fraud, the fake degree certificate, correspondence with the Diploma mill, which I'd obtained through my professional network, screenshots of his altered CV, examples of plagiarism in his published work, personal communications, recordings of conversations like tonight's, text messages where he'd mocked me to his friends, emails where he'd lied about his credentials to secure speaking engagements, legal documentation, consultation notes from 3 different attorneys outlining my options for protecting myself when the truth came out. Because Marcus's fraud wasn't just personal, it was potentially criminal. His employer had hired him based on false credentials. The companies that paid him speaking fees had been defrauded, and I had documented all of it. But the crown jewel of my collection was the video I'd recorded 2 weeks ago. I'd set up a hidden camera in the home office, legally since it was my home too, and I'd checked with my attorney, and captured Marcus practicing his Oxford keynote. Watching it now, I felt that same cold clarity I'd experienced in the hallway. Marcus stood in front of his laptop, reading from a script he'd clearly copied from various online sources, his gestures rehearsed, his tone pompous. Every few minutes he'd pause to make notes, muttering things like, "Emphasize the intellectual depth here," and "This will really impress the Oxford crowd." He'd even bought a new suit for the occasion. I'd found the receipt, $1,200 on a credit card that was already maxed out. The man was planning to show up at Oxford University and deliver a keynote address he'd never been invited to give, on a subject he barely understood, representing credentials he'd never earned. And he was going to be humiliated, but not the way he expected. I closed the laptop and checked the calendar. The Oxford conference was 6 weeks away. The engagement party my mother had insisted on hosting was in 3 weeks. And Marcus's company was holding its annual board meeting in 2 weeks, where he was supposedly being considered for a promotion to vice president of academic programs. So many dominoes, all lined up perfectly. My phone rang. Marcus calling from upstairs. "Viv, could you bring me another coffee? And maybe some of those cookies you made?" I took a breath, smoothed my expression into the mask I'd worn for 2 years, and headed back upstairs. "Of course, honey," I called out. "Anything for my brilliant fiancé." As I climbed the stairs, I mentally reviewed my timeline. Phase 1 would begin tomorrow morning with an anonymous tip to Marcus's employer, suggesting they verify their senior consultant's credentials. Nothing accusatory, just a gentle nudge toward due diligence. Phase 2 would follow once they started investigating, a conversation with the conference organizers at Oxford, confirming that Dr. Westbrook would be delighted to attend, and could they please verify the other speakers' credentials as well. Phase 3 would be the engagement party, where I'd planned a special surprise for the assembled guests. And Phase 4. Well, Phase 4 would be Oxford itself. I knocked gently on the office door, balancing a fresh cup of coffee and a plate of homemade chocolate chip cookies. "Come in," Marcus called. He was off the video call now, scrolling through something on his laptop. He didn't look up as I entered. "Here you go," I said softly, setting the coffee and cookies beside him. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" Still not looking up. "That Oxford conference? Are you nervous about it?" Now he looked at me, his expression shifting into what I'd come to think of as his teaching face, patient but slightly condescending. "Nervous? No, Viv. When you've achieved the level of academic excellence I have, you don't get nervous about these things. You get energized, excited to share your insights with fellow intellectuals. It must be such an honor, I breathed. I mean, Oxford, that's like the most famous university in the world, right? One of them, he said, allowing himself a small smile. Though honestly, the invitation wasn't surprising. My work on pedagogical frameworks has been getting quite a bit of attention in academic circles. I'm so proud of you, I said, and I let my voice crack just slightly. Even if I don't really understand what you do, I know it's important. Something flickered in his eyes. Was it guilt? Discomfort? But it passed quickly, replaced by that familiar patronizing warmth. That's what I love about you, Viv. You don't need to understand. You just need to be supportive. And you are. You're perfect just the way you are. Perfect for his purposes, he meant. Perfect for making him feel superior, intelligent, accomplished. Perfect for not asking difficult questions or demanding that he be something he wasn't. I smiled at him, sweet and empty. I'll let you get back to work. Love you. Love you too, sweetie. As I closed the door behind me, I heard him return to his typing, the keys clicking rapidly. Probably writing another email to someone in his network, claiming expertise he didn't have, referencing research he'd never conducted, building his house of cards higher and higher. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at the table, staring out at the darkening backyard. Tomorrow would begin the unraveling, but tonight, I allowed myself to feel the weight of the past 2 years. Had it been worth it? The constant performance, the dumbing down, the swallowing of my pride every time he explained something to me that I'd literally published papers about? I thought about the hundreds of students I'd helped protect by identifying fake credentials in their professors. I thought about the universities that had tightened their verification processes because of my research. I thought about the 3 diploma mills that had been shut down partially because of evidence I'd helped gather. And I thought about Marcus, who'd built an entire life on a foundation of lies, who'd looked at me every day and seen someone to feel superior to, who'd never once considered that the quiet woman who brought him coffee might be the one person in the world most capable of destroying everything he'd built. Yes, I decided. It had been worth it. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The subject line made me smile. Verification request. Marcus Holloway, PhD. It was from the HR department at Marcus's company, sent to the general inquiry address I'd used when making my anonymous tip that morning. They were starting their investigation. I composed a reply using one of my professional aliases, providing them with just enough information to point them in the right direction. The name of the diploma mill, a suggestion that they check the institution's accreditation status, a helpful link to a database of known fraudulent degree providers. By morning, someone in that HR department would be having a very uncomfortable conversation with their legal team. I sent the email and returned to my wine, watching the last light fade from the sky. Upstairs, I could hear Marcus's voice, animated and confident, as he made another video call. Probably rehearsing sections of his fake keynote for someone, basking in their admiration, feeding off the respect he'd never earned. Let him enjoy it while it lasted. Because in 6 weeks, he was going to stand in front of the actual academics at Oxford, if he even made it that far, and discover that the woman he'd dismissed as intellectually inferior was the one who'd exposed him. But first, there was the engagement party to plan. I pulled out my tablet and opened the guest list my mother had sent over. 60 people, including Marcus's entire professional network, his academic friends, my family, and several colleagues from my actual career, people I'd kept carefully separate from the charade. The party was going to be interesting. I scrolled down to the entertainment section of the planning document. My mother had suggested hiring a DJ, I had a better idea. I opened a new browser tab and searched for video production services that could compile footage into a presentation. Because I'd decided that the engagement party would feature a special video, a tribute to the happy couple, showing our journey together. Only this tribute would include some footage Marcus wouldn't be expecting, like the recordings I'd made of his contemptuous comments, the side-by-side comparison of his dissertation with the Wikipedia articles he'd plagiarized, the email correspondence showing his attempts to buy additional fake credentials, and at the very end, my personal favorite, a split-screen video. On one side, Marcus practicing his Oxford keynote. On the other side, the actual program from the conference, showing Dr. Vivian Westbrook as the opening speaker. I started drafting the video outline, my fingers flying across the keyboard. Each section would be carefully crafted to reveal another layer of deception, building to the final revelation of who I really was. The doorbell rang, interrupting my planning. I set the tablet aside and walked to the front door, wondering who would be visiting at 8:30 on a Thursday evening. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, professional attire, carrying a leather messenger bag. She looked nervous. I opened the door but kept the chain lock engaged. Yes? I'm looking for Marcus Holloway, she said. Is he home? It's important. He's working, I said carefully. Can I help you with something? She hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if checking to see if anyone had followed her. My name is Diana Price. I'm a freelance journalist. I've been investigating degree mills and academic fraud, and Marcus's name came up in my research. I was hoping to ask him some questions. Interesting. Very interesting. What kind of questions? I asked. About his PhD from the International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies. That institution is at the center of a major investigation. There are potentially hundreds of people who've used fraudulent degrees to secure jobs, speaking engagements, book deals. If Marcus is one of them... She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Look, I'd rather speak with him directly. Is he available? I studied her for a moment, my mind racing through possibilities. A journalist investigating the same diploma mill I'd been tracking. This could either complicate my plans significantly or provide an even better platform for exposure. Ms. Price, I said slowly, how much time do you have? She blinked, surprised. I have all evening. Why? I unlocked the chain and opened the door wider. Because I think you and I need to have a conversation, but not here, and not where Marcus might overhear. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks away that stays open until 11. Meet me there in 20 minutes? Who are you? She asked, clearly confused by my shift from protective fiancé to whatever I was now. I smiled. I'm the woman who's going to give you the biggest story of your career. But I need you to trust me, and I need you to be patient. Can you do that? She studied me for a long moment, journalist's instincts clearly warring with curiosity. Finally, she nodded. 20 minutes. The Coffee Bean on Maple Street? Perfect. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart racing. This wasn't part of the plan. This was a variable I hadn't accounted for, but maybe it was an opportunity. I called up the stairs. Marcus, honey, I'm running to the store for milk. We're almost out. Need anything? No, I'm good. He called back, distracted. Don't be long, okay? I might need you to proofread something for me later. Proofread. He wanted me, the woman he thought was too stupid to understand basic academic concepts. To proofread his fake research. The irony was almost painful. I grabbed my purse and laptop bag, making sure I had the tablet with all my documentation, and headed out into the evening. The Coffee Bean was quiet when I arrived, just a few students scattered at tables, buried in their laptops. Diana Price was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of something steaming in front of her. She'd set up a small recording device on the table. I slid into the seat across from her. You'll want to turn that off. For now. She raised an eyebrow but complied. You're not what I expected. Neither is Marcus, I said. But we'll get to that. First, I need to know, how much have you verified about the International Institute? Everything. It's a complete fraud. Panama-based, no actual faculty, no accreditation from any legitimate body. They've been selling degrees since 2009, averaging about 250 graduates per year. That's potentially 5,000 people with fake credentials working in positions of authority and trust. I nodded. This matched my own research. And Marcus? He purchased his PhD in 2013 for $32,000, paid in 3 installments. I have copies of the transactions. She pulled out a folder. But here's the thing. He's not my primary target. I'm working on a much bigger story about how these fake degrees have infiltrated corporate training programs and educational consulting. Marcus is just one example among hundreds. What if I told you Marcus isn't just an example? I said. What if I told you he's the perfect case study? A man who's built his entire career, his reputation, his relationships on a foundation of fraud? She leaned forward, interested now. What do you mean? I pulled out my tablet and opened one of my documentation folders. What if I told you that I've spent the past 2 years documenting every aspect of Marcus's fraud, his fake degree, his plagiarized work, his lies to employers and colleagues, his upcoming claim to be speaking at Oxford when he was never invited? Diana's eyes widened. You've been investigating him? In a manner of speaking. I took a breath. Ms. Price, before I show you what I have, I need to tell you who I am, because it's relevant to the story. I'm listening. My name is Dr. Vivian Westbrook. I have a PhD in educational psychology from Stanford, and I specialize in identifying academic fraud and credential verification. For the past 6 years, I've consulted with universities and corporations on these exact issues. I've helped shut down 3 diploma mills and identified over 400 cases of credential fraud. Her mouth opened slightly. Wait, you're the Dr. Westbrook? You wrote the Langston Prize paper on cognitive bias in credential evaluation? That's me. But Marcus said his fiancé was... She stopped, realization dawning. Oh my God. Marcus thinks I'm a college dropout who barely understands his work. For 2 years, I've let him believe that. I've documented every lie, every moment of contempt, every instance where his fraud has hurt others or benefited him unfairly. And I've been planning to expose it all at the Oxford conference where I, not Marcus, am actually the opening keynote speaker. Diana sat back, stunned. This is incredible. Why? Why would you do that? Initially, research, an experiment in how fraudulent credentials affect personal relationships and self-perception. But it became more than that. It became about holding someone accountable for systematically deceiving everyone around them. I pushed the tablet toward her. I'm going to expose Marcus in 3 weeks at our engagement party, but I'm offering you something better. Full access to all my documentation, exclusive rights to the story, on one condition. What condition? You wait until after the engagement party to publish. I want Marcus's professional network, his friends, his colleagues to hear it from me first, to see the video evidence, to understand the full scope of his deception. And then you can break the story to the world. You'll have everything: the financial records, the communications, the evidence of plagiarism, all of it. The biggest academic fraud story of the year. Diana was quiet for a long moment, her journalistic instincts clearly engaged in a fierce debate with her ethics. Finally, she said, if I agree to this, I need complete transparency. I need to be able to verify everything independently. I'm not going to be part of some revenge scheme that undermines legitimate journalism. Fair, I said. I'll give you everything I have, you can verify it all, and I'll give you context, interviews, background, the full story. But I need 3 weeks. After that, it's yours. She extended her hand. You've got a deal. We shook, and I felt the last piece of my plan click into place. The professional exposure I'd been planning was going to be amplified by media attention. Marcus's fraud wouldn't just be revealed to his immediate circle, it would become a cautionary tale, a case study in academic deception. For the next 3 hours, I walked Diana through my documentation. She took notes, asked sharp questions, and occasionally let out low whistles of amazement at the depth of evidence I'd compiled. This is prosecutable, she said at one point. His employer could press charges for fraud. The conference organizers could sue for attempted deception. This goes way beyond just personal humiliation. I know, I said. I've consulted with attorneys. I'm prepared for the legal fallout. When we finally left the coffee shop, I felt lighter somehow. Sharing the burden of knowledge, bringing someone else into the circle of truth, had made it real in a new way. I drove home slowly, mentally preparing to slip back into my role for a few more weeks. The house was dark, except for the light in Marcus's office. Still working, probably still building castles in the air with his fraudulent credentials as the foundation. I let myself in quietly and checked my phone. Another email from Jennifer. Dr. Westbrook, you have 3 new consultation requests. Also, Stanford wants to know if you're available for a guest lecture series in the spring. My real life, waiting patiently for me to return to it. I typed back, tell Stanford yes, schedule the consultations for after the 3rd week of next month. Things are about to get very busy. Upstairs, Marcus's office door was closed. I could hear music playing softly. He always listened to classical music when he was working, claimed it enhanced his intellectual capacity. I walked to our bedroom, changed into pajamas, and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. In 3 weeks, this would all be over, the performance would end, the truth would emerge, and I would reclaim my identity. But tonight, I was still Vivian the character, the uneducated fiancé who didn't understand big words or complex ideas. Tomorrow, phase 1 would begin. I fell asleep planning my speech for the engagement party, mentally rehearsing the moment when I would step out of character and into the truth. The moment when Marcus would finally see me clearly for the first time. It was going to be spectacular. The foundation has been laid. Vivian's 2-year deception is coming to an end, her evidence is compiled, and unexpected allies are emerging. The engagement party looms just 3 weeks away, a perfect stage for the first major revelation. But before that carefully orchestrated exposure, phase 1 of her plan begins tomorrow, with an anonymous tip that will start the dominoes falling. Marcus remains oblivious, confident in his fraudulent credentials and dismissive of the woman who will soon dismantle everything he's built. The irony grows deeper with each passing moment. The man who claims intellectual superiority is engaged to the one person most qualified to expose him. In part 2, the investigation begins. Marcus's colleagues start asking uncomfortable questions, and Vivian must maintain her performance even as the walls begin closing in around her fiancé. The engagement party preparations accelerate, and new complications emerge that will test whether Vivian can maintain her composure long enough to execute her plan perfectly. The countdown has begun. The call came on Tuesday morning, exactly 48 hours after I'd sent my anonymous tip to Marcus's employer. I was in the kitchen making breakfast when I heard his phone ring upstairs. Then his voice, initially confident, taking on a strained quality I'd never heard before. Yes, this is Marcus Holloway. Yes, I can hold. I turned off the stove and moved closer to the stairs, listening. I don't understand the question. My credentials? They're all on file with HR. I submitted everything when I was hired 5 years ago. A long pause. Verify them? Of course they're legitimate. Why would you even— No, I'm not being defensive. I'm just confused about why this is suddenly an issue. Another pause. Longer this time. The International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies is a fully accredited— What do you mean? No record. That's impossible. I attended there. I completed my dissertation. I have my diploma framed in my office. I smiled, pouring myself coffee with steady hands. I need to speak with HR directly. This is clearly some kind of administrative error. Someone's gotten their wires crossed. My degree is completely legitimate, and I'm frankly insulted that— Hello? Hello? Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Marcus burst into the kitchen, his face pale, still in his pajamas, though it was nearly 9. Viv, have you seen my diploma? The framed one from my office? I turned to him, keeping my expression concerned and confused. Your diploma? It's on the wall in your office, honey. Where it always is. What's wrong? They're questioning my credentials, he said, running a hand through his hair. My company. Someone told them my PhD isn't legitimate. It's insane. It's some kind of mistake, or maybe even sabotage. Richard or Daniel, maybe, getting jealous about the Oxford thing. But your degree is real, right? I asked, letting just a hint of worry creep into my voice. I mean, you went to school. You did all that work? Of course it's real, he snapped, then immediately softened. Sorry, Viv, I'm just stressed. Yes, it's completely real. This is just bureaucratic nonsense. I need to go into the office and clear this up. He rushed back upstairs. I heard drawers opening, hangers scraping in the closet. He was getting dressed in a hurry, probably planning to march into his office and intimidate HR into dropping their investigation. It wouldn't work. I'd made sure of that. My phone buzzed with a text from Diana Price. His employer just contacted the diploma mill. They're not getting anyone on the phone. Surprise? HR director told me off the record they're putting him on administrative leave pending investigation. This is moving faster than expected. I typed back, Good. Let it play out. Engagement party is still on for Saturday. Marcus reappeared in a rumpled suit, his tie crooked. I'm heading in. Don't wait up for dinner. This might take a while. Should I be worried? I asked, playing the anxious fiancé perfectly. He kissed my forehead, already distracted. No, sweetie. Just a misunderstanding. I'll have it sorted out by lunch. I watched him drive away, then immediately went to his office. The diploma hung on the wall in an expensive frame, the fake Latin phrases and forged signatures, almost convincing if you didn't know what to look for. I took a photo of it, zooming in on the parts I'd identified as fraudulent, the incorrect formatting of the institutional seal, the grammatical errors in the Latin text, the signature of a dean who'd never existed. This photo would be slide 17 in my presentation for Saturday night. The rest of Tuesday passed quietly. Marcus texted around noon. Meeting with legal team. This is taking longer than expected. Then at 3. They want me to provide original transcripts. Going home to find them. I was waiting when he burst through the door at 3:30, looking distinctly less confident than he had that morning. They want original documentation, he said, heading straight for his office. Transcripts, enrollment records, everything. It's completely excessive. But if that's what it takes to put this to rest— I followed him upstairs and watched as he pulled out a file box from his closet. Inside were papers, his fake diploma, some official-looking documents with the Institute's letterhead, and what appeared to be transcripts. All of it purchased from the diploma mill for an additional fee, all of it completely fraudulent. This should do it, he said, but his hands were shaking slightly as he gathered the papers. Viv, has anyone contacted you? Anyone asking about me? or my background, or anything strange? I thought of Diana Price at my door 2 nights ago. No, honey. Why would anyone contact me? Just be careful. If anyone does ask questions, don't tell them anything. Just say you don't know and refer them to me, okay? Of course, I said softly. Marcus, you're scaring me a little. Is everything okay? He pulled me into a hug, and I felt the tension in his body. Everything's fine. This will all blow over. Just some busybody in HR with too much time on their hands. But when he left again with his folder of fake documents, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He was starting to understand that his carefully constructed world was collapsing. Wednesday brought more developments. Marcus came home early, looking haggard. He'd been placed on administrative leave while the company conducted a thorough review of his credentials. It's a formality, he told me, pouring himself a large glass of whiskey at 2 in the afternoon. They're just covering their asses legally, but Viv, this is humiliating. Everyone in the office knows. They're all talking about it. I'm so sorry, honey, I said, rubbing his shoulders. Is there anything I can do? Just be here, he said, downing half the whiskey. Just be supportive, that's all I need. That evening, his phone rang constantly, his academic friends calling to ask what was happening. I listened as Marcus spun increasingly desperate versions of the story. It was a clerical error, a case of mistaken identity, a personal vendetta by a jealous colleague. Each time he hung up, he looked a little more desperate. Thursday morning, the Oxford conference organizers sent an email. I saw it pop up on his laptop while he was in the bathroom. They were requesting verification of his credentials before confirming his keynote slot. When Marcus read it, his face went ashen. They can't do this, he muttered. The conference is in 5 weeks. I've already told everyone. I've bought plane tickets. Can't you just send them what you sent your company? I asked innocently. It's more complicated than that, he said, closing his laptop. Oxford has different standards, more rigorous verification processes. Because they're so prestigious? Exactly. He stood abruptly. I need to make some calls. I listened from the hallway as he frantically tried to reach someone, anyone, at the International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies. The phone numbers on their website were disconnected. The email addresses bounced back. The diploma mill had disappeared. As they always did when authorities started investigating, Marcus was truly alone now, with no one to back up his lies. Friday afternoon, I was putting final touches on the engagement party arrangements when Marcus emerged from his office looking utterly defeated. Viv, we need to talk. My heart rate increased, but I kept my voice calm. What's wrong? I think we should postpone the engagement party. What? Marcus, it's tomorrow. My mother's been planning this for months. Everyone's already confirmed. I know. He sat heavily on the couch. But with everything happening at work, I just don't think the timing is right. People are going to be asking questions, and I don't want our special day overshadowed by this misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I sat beside him. Marcus, talk to me. What's really going on? He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw him weighing his options. Tell me the truth and risk losing me? Continue the lie and hope everything magically resolved itself? He chose the lie. There's been an accusation at work. Someone claiming my credentials aren't legitimate. It's complete nonsense, but you know how corporations are. They have to investigate everything. It'll blow over, but I don't want it affecting us. But Marcus, we can't cancel now. The venue, the catering, the guests. They're coming from out of town. My parents will be devastated. Then maybe, he paused, maybe I just won't attend. You could tell everyone I'm sick or had an emergency. We'll reschedule my part for later. I stared at him. He was actually suggesting I have an engagement party without my fiancé because he was too scared to face questions about his credentials. No, I said firmly, and he looked startled. I never contradicted him. No, Marcus. If we're going through with the party, we're doing it together. Whatever's happening at work, we face it as a couple. Isn't that what marriage is about? He looked torn between relief and terror. Viv, you don't understand what people might say? Then help me understand. Right now. What exactly is going on? This was the moment. He could come clean, admit everything, throw himself on my mercy. It wouldn't change what I'd planned, but it would at least show some shred of integrity. Instead, he doubled down. Someone's spreading lies about me. Jealous colleagues trying to sabotage my career because of my success, my Oxford invitation, my rising profile. But I'm going to fight it, Viv. I'm going to prove them all wrong. Then we'll face them together tomorrow night, I said, taking his hand. We'll show everyone that we're strong, that we're united. And when this all gets cleared up, they'll all feel terrible for doubting you. He squeezed my hand, and I saw gratitude mixed with dread in his eyes. You really believe in me, don't you? I believe in the truth, I said, and let him interpret that however he wanted. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Unseasonably warm for November, clear skies. Ideal for the outdoor portion of my mother's meticulously planned garden party. Marcus spent the morning in his office, making frantic calls. I heard him trying to reach Richard, Daniel, Patricia, anyone who might vouch for him, speak up on his behalf. Most weren't answering. Word had spread in his network. I spent the morning doing final checks on my presentation. The video was edited, saved in 3 backup locations. The printed documentation was organized in folders. My speech was memorized. Diana Price had confirmed she'd be there, posing as a friend of my mother's from her book club. She'd brought a camera crew that would pose as the official party videographers. Everything was in place. At 5 o'clock, I emerged from the bedroom in the dress I'd chosen, not the demure, simple thing Marcus had suggested, but an elegant navy sheath that commanded attention. I'd styled my hair up, revealing the confidence I'd been hiding for 2 years. Marcus was in the living room, dressed in his new suit, the $1,200 one he'd bought for Oxford. He looked handsome, but nervous, checking his phone obsessively. You look different, he said, studying me. It's a special occasion, I replied. Ready to go? The party was at my parents' house, their spacious backyard transformed into an elegant venue. White lights strung through the trees, tables with linen cloths, a small stage for toasts and speeches. 60 guests mingled with champagne glasses, the happy murmur of celebration filling the air. Marcus's academic friends were conspicuously absent. Richard, Daniel, Patricia had all sent last-minute regrets. But his work colleagues were there, looking uncomfortable. They knew about the investigation. My family was there. My real colleagues from Stanford and my consulting work. People who knew Dr. Vivian Westbrook but had never met Viv the uneducated fiancé. I'd kept these worlds carefully separate for 2 years, and Diana Price was there with her crew, cameras ready. My mother found me as soon as we arrived. Vivian, darling, everything looks perfect. Are you ready for your speech? More ready than I've ever been, I said. Marcus circulated nervously, accepting congratulations with forced smiles. I watched him deflect questions about work with practiced evasion. He was good at lying, I'd give him that. 2 years of practice with me had honed his skills. At 7 o'clock, my father tapped his glass for attention. Everyone, if we could gather around the stage, Vivian and Marcus have some words they'd like to share. The crowd assembled. Marcus looked at me, confused. We hadn't planned speeches together. I'd told him my parents were handling everything. I stepped onto the small stage alone, and the microphone was already positioned. The video screen behind me already set up. Thank you all for coming tonight, I began, my voice steady and clear. I know you're here to celebrate an engagement, and we will celebrate something tonight. Just perhaps not what you expected. Marcus's face went pale. He started to move toward the stage, but my father, who I'd briefed earlier, gently stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. For the past 2 years, I continued, I've been conducting a study, a research project, if you will, on academic fraud and its effects on personal relationships. The subject of this study is standing right there. I pointed to Marcus. 60 pairs of eyes turned to him. Marcus Holloway, my fiancé, has been operating under fraudulent credentials for over a decade. His PhD, which he's used to secure employment, speaking engagements, and professional credibility, was purchased from a diploma mill called the International Institute of Advanced Philosophical Studies, an institution that exists only as a website and a Panama mailbox, an institution that has no faculty, no accreditation, and no educational standards whatsoever. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face had gone from pale to crimson. "This is insane," he said loudly. "Viv, what are you doing? Have you lost your mind?" "No, Marcus. I found it." I clicked the remote in my hand and the screen behind me lit up. "Let me show you what 2 years of documentation looks like." The presentation began. First, images of his diploma with annotations pointing out the fraud indicators. Then screenshots of the diploma mill's website, the purchase transactions, the fake transcripts. "Viv, stop this." Marcus was trying to push past my father now, but my uncle had joined in restraining him. "These people don't understand. You don't understand." "Oh, but I do understand, Marcus. Better than you know." I clicked to the next slide, a copy of my Stanford diploma. "You see, my name is Dr. Vivian Westbrook. I hold a legitimate PhD in educational psychology from Stanford University. For the past 6 years, I've specialized in identifying academic fraud and credential verification. I'm the leading expert in North America on diploma mills." The crowd's attention swiveled between me and Marcus like spectators at a tennis match. "That's impossible," Marcus stammered. "You never went to college. You told me." "I told you what you wanted to hear, what you needed to believe to feel superior." I clicked again, showing screenshots of his texts mocking me to his friends. "And you believed it because it fit your narrative." The brilliant Dr. Holloway with his uneducated fiancé who couldn't possibly understand his sophisticated work. The next slides showed his plagiarized publications, side-by-side comparisons with Wikipedia articles, and other sources he'd copied verbatim. "For 2 years, Marcus, I watched you build your life on lies. I watched you accept praise for work you didn't do, claim credentials you didn't earn, and treat me with contempt because you thought I was intellectually inferior." I clicked to the video compilation. Marcus's recorded comments about me, his dismissive laughter, his conversations with his friends about my limitations. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Several of his work colleagues had pulled out their phones, clearly texting their offices. "But here's my favorite part," I said, clicking to the split-screen video of Marcus practicing his Oxford keynote on one side and the conference program on the other, showing my name as the opening speaker. "You were never invited to speak at Oxford, Marcus, but I was. I'm delivering the opening keynote on academic fraud and credential verification. And you were going to show up there, uninvited, and try to bluff your way onto that stage." Marcus had stopped trying to get to me. He stood frozen, the reality of his exposure finally sinking in. "Everything you've built is a lie," I continued, my voice gentler now. "Your career, your reputation, your relationships. You've lived in a house of cards, and tonight, I'm showing everyone what happens when someone finally tells the truth." I clicked to the final slide, a list of consequences, his company's investigation. The criminal fraud charges that could be filed, the civil suits from organizations he'd defrauded, the professional disgrace that would follow him for the rest of his life. I've given full documentation to your employer, to the Oxford conference organizers, and to a journalist who's writing a comprehensive story on diploma mill fraud. Your name will be the central case study. Diana Price stepped forward from the crowd, camera still rolling, and gave me a small nod. Why? Marcus finally found his voice. Why would you do this to me? Because someone had to, I said simply. Because every day you continued this fraud, you harmed people. The colleagues who lost opportunities to you. The students who paid for your fake expertise. The organizations that trusted your false credentials. And yes, Marcus, you harmed me. Not by underestimating me, I chose that deception, but by showing me exactly who you are when you think no one's watching. I stepped down from the stage. My mother was crying, but she was smiling too. My father hugged me. I'm sorry this turned into something other than an engagement party, I said to the crowd, but I hope it's been educational. And there's still champagne and excellent food, so please, stay and enjoy. Marcus was surrounded now by his work colleagues, all asking urgent questions. His phone was ringing constantly. I could see the reality crashing down on him in real time. I walked past him toward the house, and he grabbed my arm. Vivian, please. We can fix this. I can explain. No, Marcus. You can't explain. Because there's no explanation that makes fraud acceptable. There's no excuse that justifies a decade of lies. I loved you, he said, and for the first time I thought he might actually be telling the truth. No. You loved who you thought I was? The person who made you feel superior, intelligent, accomplished. You never loved me because you never actually saw me. I removed his hand from my arm. The engagement is off, obviously. I'll have your things sent to whatever address you provide. My attorney will be in touch about the financial arrangements. Financial arrangements? The ring you bought on credit using my excellent credit score that you applied for in both our names without telling me. The joint bank account you've been drawing from that I funded. The debts you've accumulated that I'm not responsible for. We'll sort it all out legally. I left him standing there and went inside, where Diana Price was waiting with her crew. That was powerful, she said. Better than I imagined. My editor wants to run the story Monday morning. Full spread, online, and print. Are you ready for what comes next? I've been ready for 2 years, I said. The aftermath was swift and comprehensive. By Sunday morning, Marcus's employer had terminated him for cause. By Monday, Diana's story broke nationwide, trending on social media within hours. By Tuesday, 3 more people had come forward with evidence of credentials purchased from the same diploma mill. The Oxford conference organizers released a statement thanking Dr. Vivian Westbrook for her diligence in protecting the integrity of their event. They'd strengthened their verification procedures as a result. Marcus tried calling me 17 times in the first week. I blocked his number after the 5th voicemail where he alternated between begging for forgiveness and accusing me of entrapment. My mother was disappointed about the canceled wedding but proud of my investigative work, as she called it. My father just hugged me and said, "You never did anything halfway, did you?" The academic community embraced the story as a teachable moment. I gave interviews about credential verification, about the psychology of fraud, about why people choose to build their lives on lies, and I attended the Oxford conference in December, delivering my keynote to a packed auditorium. The speech was about integrity, about the importance of earned achievement, about the damage that fraud does not just to institutions, but to the very concept of truth. Standing on that stage at Oxford, I thought about Marcus. Wondered if he was watching the live stream. Wondered if he finally understood that the woman he'd dismissed as intellectually inferior had just delivered one of the most talked about presentations in the academic world that year. 3 months later, I received a letter. Handwritten, forwarded through my attorney. Dear Vivian, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know that I'm finally seeing a therapist, finally confronting why I felt the need to lie about my credentials in the first place. It doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing excuses it. You were right about everything. I never saw you. I saw a reflection of what I wanted to believe about myself. And I'm sorry. Not just for lying to you, but for wasting 2 years of your life on my deception. I hope you're doing the work you were meant to do. I hope you know that, despite everything, you taught me something important about truth. Marcus. I read it twice, then filed it away with all the other documentation from that period of my life. The truth was, I didn't need his apology. The research I'd conducted, the story I'd helped tell, the systems I'd helped strengthen, those were my reward. I'd taken a personal deception and turned it into something meaningful, something that protected others from similar fraud. 6 months after the engagement party, I was in my office at Stanford, working on a new research project about the psychology of imposter syndrome and its relationship to actual fraud, when my assistant knocked. "Dr. Westbrook, there's someone here to see you. Says he's from the Department of Education. Something about consulting on a federal task force." I smiled. The work was never done. There would always be people trying to shortcut their way to credentials they hadn't earned, to respect they didn't deserve. But there would also always be people like me, committed to protecting the integrity of achievement, to honoring the hard work of genuine scholarship, to telling the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I'd spent 2 years pretending to be someone I wasn't to expose someone else's pretense. And in the end, I'd reclaimed not just my identity, but my purpose. The truth had set both of us free, Marcus from the exhausting performance of maintaining his lies, and me from the equally exhausting performance of hiding my capabilities. As I walked to meet the federal investigator, I passed a mirror in the hallway. The reflection showed Dr. Vivian Westbrook, educator, researcher, fraud investigator, and survivor of the strangest social experiment I'd ever conducted. I smiled at her. She smiled back. She was enough. She'd always been enough. And she never needed anyone's fraudulent credentials to prove it. The end epilogue. 6 months later, the Federal Task Force on Academic Credential Fraud became the most rewarding work of my career. We identified and shut down 14 diploma mills in the first year alone, protected thousands of students from fraudulent institutions, and helped legitimate universities strengthen their verification processes. Marcus became a case study in my workshops, anonymized, of course, though anyone who'd followed the news knew who I was talking about. He'd become a cautionary tale, a perfect example of how easy it is to build a life on lies, and how quickly it all collapses when truth comes to light. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd enrolled in a community college, actually earning credits for the first time in his life. Whether he'd finish was anyone's guess, but at least he was trying to build something real. As for me, I never pretended to be anything other than who I was ever again. The experiment had taught me that deception, even for research purposes, came with costs I hadn't fully anticipated. I'd lost 2 years of authentic living, 2 years of genuine connections, all to expose one man's fraud. Was it worth it? Every time I received an email from a student thanking me for exposing their university's fake professor, every time a company contacted me because my work had helped them avoid hiring a fraud, every time a journalist cited my research in an article about academic integrity, yes, it was worth it. But I'd never do it again. Truth, I learned, is most powerful when spoken clearly and directly, not hidden behind layers of performance and deception. And that was the real lesson of my 2 years with Marcus Holloway. Authenticity matters. In credentials, in relationships, in life. We owe ourselves and each other the truth. Always. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.